Hey guys, thanks for watching Double Tap here on YouTube. In this clip, we dive into the latest hardware from Apple, the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max.
You're watching Double Tap TV.
Okay, Stephen, it's time to get handsy because I've got some new iPhones here that are begging to be opened and showcased here on Double Tap TV.
Oh, I'm excited. Right, what have you got?
Okay, well, let's look to the overhead camera here. I'm going to show you on my desk in front of me. I've got three phones to discuss today. We've got the iPhone 14 on the far left, which is not the Pro or the Pro Max. Very important distinction. There is a phone missing in this collection, by the way, in terms of what Apple announced, and that is the 14 Plus. That is because that is not available or was not available till several weeks after we got our hands on this. And the reason is because it's a brand new form factor for Apple. The middle one in my collection here on my desk in front of me is the iPhone 14 Pro. How do you know it's a Pro? Well, that's because when you look at the image on the top of the box, you can see the pill cutout versus the notch on the top of the screen. And to the far right, I've got the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Now, I'm not going to talk about the Pro because I want to throw it on the side because it's very similar to the form factor of the 14. And we're going to talk about all those features in the Pro Max, of course. So let's first take our hands on and let's unbox the iPhone 14. This is not the Pro. Now, this comes in several variations in terms of the models that are available. I'm going to actually physically look. I'm literally opening the box, Stephen. I'm pulling the tape off the box, and I'm doing it right here in front of you. So
you're not taking off the sticky paper.
I'm going to do that too. It's like ASMR for phones. So inside the box these days, you don't get much anymore. We've got the new purple color iPhone 14 here. You can tell it's an iPhone 14 because it's got only two cameras on this device. Two cameras, a flash, and a microphone. There is no LiDAR sensor on the back of this device, which is important for a lot of those features, especially accessibility features that we've come to, get used to on the iPhone, at least on the Pro lineup of things. When you pull the device up, we're going to actually hold it up to the front camera here. We're going to peel the plastic off. You've got a nice matte metal ring around the collar, as they say, ring around the phone. I'll hold that closer to the overhead camera so you guys can see that over there. We've got the sleep wake button on the right hand side. We've got the volume rocker on the left hand side. Of course, that vibrate and silent button there. And that's really about it when it comes to the phone. You know why this is so familiar, Stephen? Because this is virtually identical, even to the innards of the iPhone 13 Pros. I mean, I'm talking about when they even ripped apart this phone, it looks the same on the inside. There is not much to differentiate this other than the fact that the price is definitely a more entry-level price when you talk about this device. And we're talking about entry-level of like $699 Canadian dollars, which is a pretty cool entry point when you talk about some of the pro-level devices that go all the way up to even $2,000, if not higher than that, which is pretty insane. Also inside the box, Stephen, we've got, of course, the cable, the lightning cable, which comes with every single phone. And that's it. You got like a little sticker, you got a little, SIM removal tool. That's pretty much it. No more charging brick anymore. You know what I do for the charging brick, by the way? And I have this right next to me, conveniently enough. I go to companies like Belkin, and they have this really cool Boost Charge Pro dual wall charger. This is new GAN charging technology. A small little nub of a charging brick gives you 45 watts on 2 ports. So we'll put that aside and give Belkin a plug a little bit later. Are you ready for the Pro?
Actually, just before you say that, just a reminder, of course, that if you're in the US, it is in fact rest in peace to that little SIM removal tool. That's it. It's gone. Because it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, not the case in Canada, though.
No, definitely not the case in Canada, and not the case outside of the U.S. And I think that's because they're dealing with a lot of partners here. Not every carrier in the world supports the eSIM. In Canada, we actually do support it, by the way, on most of the carriers, but there's still a couple holdouts, I think, so they don't want to segregate themselves from anybody else in the world. So that SIM is gone, and you won't have to worry about that. Some argue that it's going to be a convenience. Some argue that's going to be a little bit of a pain, especially for people who travel a lot and like swapping their SIM cards. That's an argument. That's a point I get.
Yeah, I will say though, from an accessibility point of view, I think it's fantastic. And switching over to a new device from my wife, it came up right away and said, "Hey, do you want to ditch the old physical SIM card and actually swap to an eSIM?" you literally hit the continue button, and that was it. It was done. And her SIM was dead on the other iPhone and all set up on the eSIM on the new one. So much easier. Anyway, sorry, you're going through the pros now. So what have you got there?
Well, I'm getting to the Pro. If you give me a moment here, no. I've got the Pro Max in front of me here. And the big distinguishing point between the, of course, iPhone 14 and the Pro Max is this new dynamic island, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But it's really just looks like a giant pill cutout at the top of the display. So instead of a notch,
how big is that? Because this is what I'm trying to figure out. Compared to the notch, how big is this pill that we're talking about here?
Well, let me pull the little screen off the phone here, and let me actually power this one on. This is the Pro Max I'm holding with my little overhead camera here. And when the screen turns on, you really kind of get an indication of what it looks like. It's a little bit narrower than the notch was, but a little bit taller in terms of the height. The difference is it's not flush against the top of the phone, so it's not as easy to hide into that top bar on the phone like with status indications. So they've actually moved it a little bit down. It looks like a pill. It probably takes up about a third of the width of the phone if you look at it in comparison to what's going on, whereas the notch was probably you know what? I wouldn't even say a third. The notch was probably a little bit larger than it in terms of the width. The pill, definitely a little bit smaller, but it's actually comprised, Stephen, and you can see it when the phone is off. It's comprised of two cutouts to the screen. There's a pill-style cutout to the left and a round cutout for the camera on the right. And Apple uses screen technology and software to blend the two of them into this one pill shape. And that's where they've taken this to a whole new level. They've turned this cutout, which has to be there for sensors and cameras, into something that is extremely aesthetic software-wise. A pretty cool feature, and things like music can go up to that bar. Things like notifications can go up to that bar. If location services are being used, it goes up to that bar. Lots of things get out of your way notification-wise, and instead of popping up on the top or the bottom, they go to that area. So it actually ends up being a little bit less intrusive overall.
Now, I know we're going to talk about software later, but I want to focus on the device itself. The main question I think a lot of us have is how big are those camera bumps on the back of the device?
Let's talk about those camera bumps, because I also have, thankfully here, my old iPhone 13 Pro Max. Physically, they are the same size. There's, I think, 0.08 of an inch difference in terms of height. Width is exactly the same. Cases pretty much fit. However, when you look at them side by side, especially on the overhead camera, the bump is absolutely insane. It is probably double the size in terms of both width of the camera lenses themselves and also the bump that sticks out. Now, thankfully, Apple gets creative when it comes to their cases, and the cases mask that very, very well, but it's definitely a bump that you don't want to be hitting onto a table, etc., etc. So if you're one of those people that like to go naked without an actual iPhone case, I recommend you do not do that. So it's definitely bigger. You still have the LiDAR sensor. You still got the flash. Obviously, a better camera system on board. You've got a 48 megapixel main camera. You've got a ultra wide, and you've got a telephoto lens. And that 48 megapixel really is quite insane when it comes to photography. Where actually, Stephen, I feel like we look at these phones less so about the phone functionality these days, and more so about all the software services and the cameras and everything that comes on board, because everything else, honestly, a little bit bigger of a battery, so you get a little bit better battery life on it. The feel in your hand is great. Noticeably heavier, though, compared to last year's model. Definitely heavier, and I think that is because of the camera system. However, they do a great job at balancing things. So in your hand, it's not like it's top heavy, like some of those other phones on the market. It's not going to kind of fall out of your hand. So overall, really quite nice aesthetic. Lots of different color options as well, which we'll throw on the screen as well. There's a purple, there's a blue, there's a product red, and this new really kind of dark black, which has a really nice shiny side. The sides and around the phone is nice and shiny black, although, you know, that's a fingerprint magnet. And the back is like this grayish, dark grayish kind of hue to it as well, which is pretty cool. And everything else is the same. I mean, the location of the buttons, the SIM card tray on the Canadian versions, or the lack of the SIM card tray on the US versions. Everything else is where you'd expect it to be. So really, the difference is, other than the processor, which is the A16, comes down to the software experience on these.
You know what? I made the decision, and I'm holding in my hand here, I've got the iPhone 14 Pro, and I made the decision to go for this purely, if I'm honest, for that LiDAR feature. You know, I had the 13 Mini previously, and I just wanted to get LiDAR on my device. We're going to talk about why a bit later, but it is such a great feature. And, it's a great phone as well. And I think the 14 Pro for a lot of people is probably the right one to get. The 14 and the 14 Plus, it depends on what you do with your device. If it's as Tim Cook said recently when he suggested to someone that they should buy their mum an iPhone, maybe the 14 is the one to go for. But for most of us, and people who want to take pictures and use it that way and really benefit from that camera, I think the 14 Pro is the sweet spot.
It definitely is. Also, price-wise, it's a good entry point. You're not going to spend $2,000, and you're going to get all the benefits of everything else, including the camera system and everything else that goes along with it. But Stephen, there's so much more to talk about, especially when it comes to software. So let's take a quick break, and let's come back and let's talk about some of those features and try to go a little bit hands-on, or at least show you some demonstrations on screen about how those things work. Stick around.
Can't get enough Double Tap TV? Subscribe to the podcast and get your fill of Double Tap every day. Visit doubletaponair.com and follow us now. Double Tap TV will be right back.
Thanks for watching Double Tap here on YouTube. If you're not already subscribed, please do that so you don't miss another video.